There we go. Welcome, everyone. We are going to record this so that you'll be able to watch it later. So please keep that in mind. You will also get resources and links and such at the tomorrow or the next day. By the end of the week, we will certainly be sending all that information to you as well via email. So thanks for being here today. This is our second of our webinar series about AI in education in California. We're going to be talking about safe use and data privacy. So what I'd love for you to do is introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're from and how do you keep your data safe? How do you keep your data safe? Christina, how do you keep your data safe?
Oh my gosh, I was just writing that into the chat, but I'm more than happy to share here.
Awesome.
I do my best to reset my passwords, not frequently,
Okay.
because I have been informed that frequent changing can actually lead to more similar passwords, adding that exclamation point at the end or what have you. But when resetting your passwords, having at least 20 characters, the mix of uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and numerics. So that's where my head tends to go to when I try to keep my data safe.
Awesome. Awesome. I will say as well, I do stay away from using what I've been told is the most common password of all, which I've been told is ABCD1234. Not sure if that's true, but it does make sense. I'll be honest, when I was young, I did used to use ABC123, which is very, very common and not secure. By the way, does everyone know what month it is? Christina, can you share what month it is?
I would love to share that not only is it October, it is also Cybersecurity Month. And to that, we have next week coming up with Digital Citizenship Week. So there's a huge connection there between how to be a safe and responsible digital citizen, along with keeping your data safe and private with Cybersecurity Month. So we've got that great panel set up for everybody today to help address these topics.
Awesome. And I love there's some people talking about some password managers, not keeping all the cookies, password locker, all sorts of things like that. So, and favorite time of the year, Digcit Week. Love it. Awesome. Let's go ahead and move on. I want to let everyone know that the California Department of Education does have AI guidance that is available to you. And that is what these webinars are based on as an outline. So you can check that out at bit.ly CDE _AI. That's all capital letters. And we're really focusing on learning with AI because AI is here and figuring out how we can do that safely. And then also learning about AI because as we learn about it, we know how to better be safe. I'll go ahead and introduce myself briefly. My name is Catherine Goyette. I am the Computer Science Coordinator here at California Department of Education. And Christina, can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. First thing that I want to introduce myself about is I need to get a new picture that isn't blurry and blurring my face. So that's one. But I am also at the California Department of Education leading the efforts on digital equity and broadband coordination, all in service of our state superintendents closing the digital divide initiative. So I'm really thrilled to be here and part of this great team.
Excellent, excellent. And, we look at this first question, what role does digital safety play in California K-12 schools? You're working with digital equity. I'm working with computer science, both of which talk about stuff, right? We like technology things that the kids are accessing. So we got to really think about this, right? What's the first thing you think of, Christina, when you think of digital safety in K-12?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like to think of, this analogy of building a house, and you need to have that good solid concrete foundation of making sure that, well, one, you actually have access to the necessary technologies, right? That robust and reliable infrastructure. And once you have that, thinking about what are those safeguards that you are going to then enable and establish on the back end to keeping your community safe, your students, your teachers, your staff, and so on, while then simultaneously thinking about how are you raising awareness and educating the users of that technology, because the reality is once people leave that beautiful secured walled garden, how are they going to apply and transfer their knowledge of safe uses into the real world? So that's all what's on top of mind when it comes to our digital equity and all the things that digital safety play in our schools.
All right. Well, that sounds like a lot. That sounds like a lot
Oh,
to do.
yeah.
And so we have brought some individuals here that are going to share with us how to do that and give us some resources so that we can understand what are those safeguards we need to have in place, what laws do we need to follow, what do all these acronyms mean, and how can I, as an educator, make sure that I have resources and I can learn, and also that I can teach my students as well. So before we do that real quickly, though, this is the first of our really delving into our series here. We're talking about safe use, reviewing data collection and user privacy regarding AI specifically. We're doing that today. And in the future, we are going to go deeper into these other fundamental skills, as well as some other information from the AI guidance from CDE as well. And I just want to think about how AI might impact the future. Does anyone recognize this? Does anyone know who this is? I'm curious. Anyone let us know in the chat? It's Hal. Yes, it is Hal. Right. And so sometimes we think of artificial intelligence, we think, oh my goodness, are they going to threaten the safety of humankind as we know it? Right. Is that something that could happen? Or perhaps you might have been born in the late 1900s and be thinking about Terminator, right? Or maybe you're thinking, is the future going to predict crime and crimes that are going to happen? Potentially, is this already happening? Interesting question. We'll talk about algorithmic bias and stuff in and such in a future session. But how is AI impacting the present? And so what I did was I decided to look and see what AI, and I have to say, one of our presenters, Merv, did point out that I had a typo here, but guess what? The AI is so smart. ChatGPT like still answered my question. So I just decided, let's just go right to the source. And I asked, hey, ChatGPT, are you collecting information from me? And who are you sharing this with? And so at first, it says it doesn't have any access to personal data, but then it says, unless it has been shared with me during our conversation. Do you think that our students might be unintentionally sharing their information? What does that look like? So I thought that's something we need to explore. Then I asked Bard. Bard was a little more honest before I even asked the question. I didn't even have to ask the question because it said, don't enter sensitive info, with a whole like security badge. So particularly in cybersecurity month, I think this is really important for us to be aware of in our personal lives, but as Christina said, absolutely for our students as we are thinking about their safety also. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. And I would love to introduce Merv Lapis, who's, and I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself as well, Merv. We are so glad that you are here to discuss with us what we as educators and what our students need to know regarding safety and privacy in this AI world.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, both of you, and well, and everyone here today. Thanks for your afternoons. and being part of this conversation. So my name is Merv Lapus. I'm the Vice President of Education Outreach and Engagement for Common Sense Media and Common Sense Education, for any of you who have heard of the organization. I'm not going to jump into the 30,000 foot view of the work that we do, but my role is really focused in working with schools and really understanding what are the issues, the dilemmas, and really the opportunities as well that technology brings to them, so that they can really foster a community and a culture of digital citizenship and technology use for learning in life, because it is essentially life for so many of our well, for all kids now, and especially after the shutdowns, like 96% of schools being one-to-one. Just technology is a big part of that. And now we've got this, influx of something that is either really exciting or really terrifying for folks in AI. And so my big focus and our big goal right now is to jump into this conversation and really address it in a way that's approachable for all educators. I mean, it's great, like the conversations I have in the districts that we work with, a lot of those educators are very like tech focused and are already speaking that language and really excited to test and learn. But for most educators out there, just really understanding what technology is, especially in this case, what AI is going to be really important. So we want to do what we can to really make it approachable, especially as we talk about privacy and security in that thread. So if you move on to the next slide, one of the things that we like to start with, and all these things, I'll show you where all these things are available on our site for free to use for any of your schools and classrooms and educators. But one of the things we want to start with is just recognizing that it's been here, right? AI has been here in the pockets of our students and in your purses and in your own pockets for years, right? Social media companies have been using AI for well over a decade. And in that time, social media has become a cornerstone for our digital experiences more and more, right? What's really interesting is that we don't necessarily call it out as AI. We just recognize, we call them as algorithms, or we just say, oh, that's just how it works. But it is artificial intelligence in the sense that it is gathering information and making recommendations, right? And we'll talk about how we then approach kind of this next stage in the next few slides. Next slide, please. When we talk about generative AI, this is really where that landscape is shifting, right? Where this technology is far more accessible, but it is also giving a broader spectrum of use in the way that it's generating, or what it's generating and what it's doing. And so in order to do that, we really need to present a very easy to understand way for our students and even us as educators to understand, okay, so what is actually happening here? What makes generative AI different from the platforms that I've been using up to this point? Because the reality is most platforms we're using at this point have been using the suggestive or recommendation AIs, but they are very, very fast integrating generative AI. So it is important to know how that is fed and what that information looks like. So I'm going to show you a quick video, one that we created for students, but I've been quickly hearing that every educator should just watch this video. It's very helpful to get that sense. So it's just a little over 2 minutes long, but you can stop listening to me for a few, and let's hear from our great video team around what is AI.
Excellent, thank you.
You've probably heard a lot about AI recently, but what is it really? AI, or artificial intelligence, is when we teach computers how to do things that usually require human intelligence, like identifying an object, understanding human speech, and even talking. But how do you teach a computer to learn and think? Well, it's kind of like when you train a pet to do tricks. Think of AI as a robot dog that you're training to fetch a toy. At first, your robot dog might not even know what a dog toy is, so that's the first thing you need to teach it. You show it lots of pictures of dog toys so that it learns to recognize them quickly and easily. It might make some mistakes at first, but with each correct answer, it gets a reward. Over time, the dog's recognition improves, the same way you improve at any task the more you do it. And once the robot dog gets really good at recognizing what a dog toy is, you can move on to teaching it the next step of playing fetch, running after the toy and bringing it back to you. This is basic AI, which learns by analyzing lots of data, in this case, pictures of dog toys and how to play fetch. But there's something even more complex, called generative AI, which is more like a creative robot that can improvise when it comes to making art or writing. Unlike the robot dog, the creative robot learns from everything on the internet: videos, text, photos, you name it. When you ask it a question or give a hint, It uses what it has learned from the internet to create new things, like answers, stories, or even pictures. But here's the catch. That creative robot can sometimes make mistakes, and it doesn't know the difference between good and bad. It doesn't know if what it creates is helpful or hurtful. It can't always tell facts from fiction or know where its information comes from. It might even use someone's work without crediting them. It just sucks up all the random or not so random information that's floating out there on the internet. That's why we, as humans, have to think hard and be critical about the information we receive from AI. We have to know what it does well and what it doesn't do well. As we use generative AI in our lives, remember that we have to be smart and responsible with how we use it.
All right, thank you for that. So that video, as we think about like just what is generative AI, what does it mean to us, what is AI in general, if you can move to the next slide. The focus here that we should all understand as educators, and especially as we talk to our students, is that it is all about analyzing data or information. And the more that we feed it, the more accurate it can become at completing a task, right? But we need to realize that it is pulling information, depending on what tool you're using, from a huge swath of the internet, or you're feeding it something very specific and you're asking for a particular task to be completed from what you're providing it. So it is important to know, what tool am I using? What tool am I going to explore? And what am I ingesting into it? What data am I putting into it? And is that data going to actually be helpful for my task? Or am I potentially also sharing data, again, understanding how that tool works, into a space that I didn't want that information to live, right? Or am I accidentally uploading batches of data that I didn't intend to share? So it is incredibly important to recognize that it is all focused on the data we send, the data that it analyzed, and then that's what gets fed back in whichever form of generative AI you might be exploring. If we go to the next. The two main points that we walk through with educators is really understanding that the data is a building block of the artificial intelligence. It's not just that they're going to come and rise up and all of a sudden the robots know exactly what to do. They're working off of building blocks. And what the AI can do is going to be really based on the data that we can train it to do. So if you feed it with your personal information, we're easily going to train it to find you and find everything about you, right? But if you feed it with information that's purely about the things that you need for a particular task, then you can really focus on building it or training it to use it to really the specifications that you intend. So as much as we hope that these tools will put on guardrails that will not allow for your information if accidentally uploaded, or even might be uploaded in other public spaces, but we just don't want it to be easily pulled for the use of whatever the platform you might be using, those types of things are being discussed and are being looked at as future policy. But in terms of what you can control, if there's an opportunity that a tool can provide you, then you just need to know that with that opportunity, what are the right guardrails for the information that we provide forward? Next slide. This is an example of an activity that you could easily bring into any of your classrooms. So we were talking about earlier that it all depends on your inputs, and that will pull out the potential outputs. So I'm sure that many of you have seen some kind of personalized advertisement on your browser, on a social media platform you're using, on something. I might have been talking about how much I love driving around in my Jeep Wrangler for fun when we're out there because I just want some fresh breeze air. And why is it that one of the first things that pop up are accessories when I end up going through my feeds for something like that, right? I'm feeding it, or we're allowing certain things to feed it. And so knowing how information is gathering your personal information, what you're allowing it to access, and then what are you feeding it directly by your search history or by the things that you're directly liking or trying to share. So I would love for you all to put into the chat, if we're trying to find a personalized advertisement on, in this case, it's a dress, but think of anything that you're really interested in. What kinds of inputs are you potentially putting in to the platforms you're using that can help personalize an advertisement that's going to come your way? There's a really fun experience when kids are saying, "Oh, this is what I put in all the time." Yeah, what types of things might a personalized advertisement be looking for in terms of your information? and make sure that it's targeting you with something you're interested in. Color, size, price, brand, length, yeah, brand name, sure, music, interesting, yeah. Time and location, yeah. Some of these things almost are embedded into some of the things we post, right? So if you're not thinking about just an uploaded image that you posted that's geotagging or even that has brands in the background, right? Those things are actively being scanned and are helping to generate these personalized advertisements. And this is just a recommendation algorithm, let alone creating something new. So if we go to the next slide, it'll show you some examples. Thank you all for sharing, by the way. Then this will help really your students and even some of your colleagues just better understand your search history, your social media activity, online purchases, video watch history. That's just a basic, kind of levels of inputs, but so many more of the things that you all put here are just a part of it. Go on to the next. So just closing reflection, and I want to share with you where you can get all of these resources that I just essentially pulled these from, just to give you kind of an overview and really approach what is AI. What we do online and the data that we share is part of all the inputs or the data that the AI might use, but thinking critically about the data behind an AI can help us be more informed users, right? And understand that the AI does have limitations, and it's important to know what those limitations are so we know how to move forward with it. That's why it's so great that we're doing this during this month, and then also that Digital Citizenship Week is literally next week, because when we talk about AI preparedness and being ready to use AI or potentially explore what it means, it all comes down to really being informed with how it works, what you're putting into it, and what you could expect to get out of it. And know that, yeah, there's a lot of big fanciful feelings around, oh, AI is going to ruin the world and the rise of the machines. Those were made for movies, right? They're fun, but it's not necessarily the reality. So really being more informed, but also if you're supporting educators, how do you make this discussion way more approachable? It's not just going to be about, it's really interesting, try it, or you'll have a good time, try it. For many educators, they're willing to, but for a lot of educators, you have to get me there, right? And so really making it approachable and understanding that these are things that are already existing in their day-to-day use, whether they're using Facebook, Google search, anything else, they're using AI already. So let's just better understand how generative AI works. So moving forward, last things I just want to leave you with, next slide, essentially is all of our resources at Common Sense around AI and around Digital Citizenship Week next week. It's all free for you to use. You just have to visit commonsense.org. Next week, we're focusing primarily on digital well-being and releasing brand new AI resources for the classroom. So if you visit the site and go to the education page, you'll actually see a suite of 10 new lessons that are going to be middle high school focused, that are all about introducing AI into your classrooms and having those discussions. So I'll make sure that I get that link to our team here and have those available for you all as you either rewatch this video or explore the links later. But thank you for your time, and I'll be around for questions around these resources and how we work with districts around AI at the later end. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, Merv. This is what's great about this is some of these things as adults, we don't stop and think about and realize, right? And so the fact that, but we notice, I remember having conversations with my husband, and he's talking, or he's watching some sports. I don't really watch sports. And then all of a sudden, that's the kind of news I'm getting, is that team, right? It's like, wow, how did it know that? So I know, like implicitly, I guess it's tracking me, right? I guess it's listening. But I think part of the challenge is, how do teachers that don't really quite know how these platforms work, how do they teach their kids these? And so I love that you have all these resources that educators can check out, especially with Digital Citizenship coming up next week, and especially the fact that it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I do want to let everyone know that the slides are going to be sent to you via email by the end of the week. And there's going to be time for questions and answers at the end, but feel free to drop questions in the chat because all of our speakers will be able to see the chat and answer in there as well, as well as that last portion. So thank you so much. I really appreciate those approachable resources and the way that was framed. Thank you so much for being with us, Merv. Let's go ahead and move on to our next speaker, Anthony Davis, who is going to talk a little bit about kind of what Christina alluded to earlier. Like, what are those guardrails that we need to put in on the back end? What are our IT departments working on? What should they be thinking about? And what should we need to know as educators? So, Anthony, so glad you're here. If you want to introduce yourself and get started.
Absolutely. Anthony Davis, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Kern County Superintendent of Schools. For those of you who don't know, we're the county COE for Kern County. So yeah, very important, safety and privacy and security. So I get the joy of explaining kind of the why. You know, Merv's been talking about kind of the what and what AI is. So why is safety and privacy so important to us? And so if you want to go ahead and change to the next slide. It's not always an exciting thing to talk about security. I mean, often we deal with this alphabet soup, and I've thrown some laws out there, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I wanted to kind of demystify some of the laws that we see around data privacy and data security. I'm sure most of us in education are very familiar with Furpa. There, you may have heard of Furpa. And I will tell you, I'm not an attorney, but I deal with our attorneys all the time, and I've actually been in data security outside of education, but since what did Catherine call it? Since the late 1900s. So I actually got a hand in creating some of the security and privacy rules for HIPAA back with the federal government in Washington, D.C. In the late 1900s, as it was said. But the good news here, we've got good and bad news. The good news is as educators, we really don't have to focus on all of these. The bad news is the reason that we don't have to worry about things like Sarbanes-Oxley or PCI compliance and some of those others is because FERPA has all of them kind of rolled up into it. FERPA covers Social Security numbers, which would normally fall under something like PCI compliance. It covers medical insurance information, which you would see normally under HIPAA. It covers online personal information. So while we don't have to necessarily be very adamant about going through each of the federal each of these laws and applying to them, it's because FERPA kind of rolls everything up into one. And often when I go to our attorneys asking a question, they just say, yes, it applies to us because everything applies to FERPA if it has to do with students and data. So, so I want to demystify that and say, really, we're looking at just the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Next slide, please. Why is it important? And I'm one of those big bad IT leaders who is often telling educators, no, you can't have that. I like to think of us as trying to say yes. So instead of saying no, we're saying, okay, it's no for right now, but let's figure out how I can say yes. But there are the times that we have to say no, not right now, or no, not that way. And why is it that you need to build a good relationship with your IT staff? And why, if you're an IT staff, why it's a good idea to build a good relationship with your teachers who are trying to teach this information. The reason being is because there's something in IT we call shadow IT. They need to teach our students technology, and AI is that new technology that's out there. And if we don't give tools that allows teachers to easily and successfully teach, it's still going to need to be taught. And so we as IT leaders need to be helpful with that. However, it's important for teachers that when they're building the relationships with their IT, they need to understand that we're trying to make sure the organization follows FERPA. We're trying to keep the organization safe because there are days when things go bad. And I wanted to point out a couple of the things that that go bad. If you look at the most common breaches that happen when it's a FERPA violation, it's often teachers and staff leaving PII or personal identifiable information open on a computer, printing out a report. So a lot of our FERPA violations in the past haven't necessarily come from computer-related breaches. A lot of times they're coming from more inadvertent practices, problems with practices. But I see that as we move more and more digital, it's going to become more and more of a digital concern and less of a problem of practice. And I'm not going to go into all the details because I think Shelby's got some stuff in her slides where she'll be talking about some of this. But I did want to identify, we have seen some major breaches in technology. And I know many of you say, well, man, why do I have to let them know when I'm getting this iPad? Or why is it so important that I get this agreement set up with this software organization? And it's there really to protect us. No matter how big the organization is, it runs risk of being breached. And we start talking about AI, and if you're specifically looking at ChatGPT, we've got 3 major breaches. These are 3 of the largest breaches that have happened in the last 20 years. Yahoo is technically seen as the largest because of 3 billion user accounts exposed. Microsoft was the second because it had 30 to 60,000 companies, 30,000 in the US and 60,000 worldwide. And then Facebook had 530 million users. And you say, well, what's that got to do with AI and chat? Well, a lot of these companies are the ones that are investing heavily in chat. In fact, OpenAI, who is the source of ChatGPT, 4 and 4.5, they're actually the lion's share of their funding. I think it's 10 of the $13 billion that OpenAI has funded is from Microsoft. So these are the companies that will be housing the data that we're putting in there, that students are putting into this tool. So as much as we'd like to think they're doing everything they can to protect us, it's important that we also protect ourselves so that we can maintain FERPA compliance, so that we can maintain be a good steward of the data that the students and their parents have put in our hands. Next slide, please. While that's advancing, just something interesting for everyone. Did you know that FERPA is actually one of the laws that have been around longest of all those ones I listed? HIPAA is from, it was from the late 90s and early 2000s. So PIPA was from 2014. Sarbanes-Oxley was 2002. PCI wasn't until 2006. So actually, our FERPA mandates have been along a lot longer than technology has really been there. So we're just learning how to make technology now, how to use technology and make it compliant with FERPA. Things do go bad. And Merv, I heard you mention a Jeep. So one of the things I put up here was actually Jeep had got one of their Jeeps hacked, and a hacker was able to speed up, slow down, and ultimately shut off a person's vehicle while they were operating it. So hopefully you were joking about your Jeep, may want to take a look at that. Another one I wanted to bring up was the fish tank thermometer that allowed a huge casino to get hacked in Las Vegas. This wasn't the recent hack that you heard about. This is a while back. So when you're dealing with your IT directors, if you're dealing with your IT staff and you're wondering why they're making such a big deal about what seems like such an easy thing to use, it's not because we're trying to be obstructive. Keep in mind that there are some things that we're trying to protect against. And if a thermometer in a fish tank can cause millions of dollars worth of damage, we've kind of got to take a look at everything. And then I did throw a couple of other pictures up here. I thought it was important to know California, we're second on the list of the most data breaches in the United States. New York beat us. They doubled our numbers we're at over 300 breaches from 2005 to 2023, and they were over 600 breaches. But what is different, and that's that little graph you see on the left-hand side, what's different is the graph on the right is the number of records breached. While we are second in number of incidents, we're number 1 in number of records breached. So we just have a larger population of students, and the breaches that have happened have impacted more of our California students. And so as we move forward with AI, what I'm kind of the ask from everyone here is, take time to build a relationship with your technology leaders. Let's not make it adversarial. Let's understand that we're both trying to get to the same thing, which is really educate kids on how to be intelligent with data and how to use the tools that we're giving them safely and securely, and be partners really to work together on it.
Thank you.
I will, as Merv said, I'll be hanging around at the end also to answer questions that people may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Anthony, especially I will be honest, as an educator, I was one of those teachers at first that would keep asking for things and keep being told no, and didn't really understand why. And the more I learned about a lot of these risks and what things happen, you know, what happens to the network if I want such and such for my students. It really helped a lot. So I agree that that relationship with your IT is really important. So you know, you don't necessarily have to know all these laws, but your IT people do, and they connect with the legal teams, and so that can really be helpful. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was just going to say, and it's complicated too, because I mean, even you look at something like Google, where we have core Google applications that do adhere to Furpa laws, but then you go from the core to Google Maps or to something else, and it's complicated for teachers to stay up on what is Furpa compliant and what is safe. And that's where your IT department can be a partner to work to use either like the site national data privacy agreements with your vendors, used to be called the CSDPAs, now they're the NDPAs. So your IT departments can often help get agreements in place with those software and hardware manufacturers to ensure that the way you use that technology is safe, and that'll help you be able to at least have a little bit of peace of mind that what we are using is safe for students.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Anthony. Absolutely. I know, Christina, we had a conversation about Google Earth when that was first coming out. Did you want to share that story real quickly?
It's the gist of it is similar now, continuing on to Anthony's point of, you know, Google Maps, right? Like Google is a commonly used platform for communication, collaboration, everything in schools. And while the core apps are retained and refined, once you venture out to say Google Maps, Google Earth, and you've got very well-intended educators wanting to share for students and let them go explore, students just, they'll put in those PIIs, that personal information. And really, we do not yet have a way to protect our students or our teachers from what are really great instructional tools. It's just that they could infringe on privacy and safety. And so we have to be super mindful of that. And so that was, I recall that was a hard no. I mean, yes, let's work together. Because obviously we don't want to suffocate or restrict amazing uses for technology and instruction, but we have to be mindful that we are responsible. We are liable to keeping our users safe within schools. And so how can we work together? And I think that was a huge piece that Anthony just raised, that we need to say no now, but let's come together. Let's really figure out what are your instructional objectives and how can we then come to a happy middle, a happy place to get you to meeting those instructional objectives using technology.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. And you know, that what that makes me think of is and I've seen this happen, and I'll be honest, I used Google Earth back in, gosh, I don't know, 2012 or something. I used it. I didn't have my students use it, only because I didn't have the devices, right, for all of them at that time. But what's the first thing that all the kids want to go to? They type in their address, right? And so unknowingly, they are giving that personal information. So with that, I think it's so important that not only educators know about this, but that students do also. And so our next speaker has some great resources that educators can share with students. And it's also just going to talk a little bit more about data ethics and collection and how it works and all sorts of things. Shilpi Agarwal has a passion for this stuff. And I just love that she has agreed to come here and share some free resources that all of you can access as well. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Shilpi, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and get started. And let us know how we can help our teachers and our students.
Thank you, Catherine. Great presentation, and by all the speakers so far. I missed a portion of Christina's talk, but I heard Anthony and Merv, and fantastic conversation so far. Hi, everyone. My name is Shilpi Agarwal. I'm the founder and I'm the founder and CEO of Data Ethics for All Foundation, with a mission to raise the next generation of ethics first data and AI champions. What ethics first means is that ethics is at the forefront of all decision making, whether it is design to development to deployment, as opposed to an afterthought. Today, in less than 4 years, we have a community platform, free. It's a global platform for advocates as well as data and AI leaders who want to talk about issues related to technology, ethics, and policy. And we have members from 71 countries in the world. So with that, I would like to, so Anthony and Merv talked a lot about the what and the why of AI. And now I would like to talk about the source of AI, which is data. Next slide, please. So as we know that we can't really create any AI algorithms or generative AI models without data. Data is at the core of all of these models. And as we are collecting data, whether we are procuring data from third-party sources or first-party sources, like we are actually actively collecting data, we need to make sure what our ethical practices are we following when we are doing that. So what I like to say is that we need to start with an end goal in mind. So just like Anthony was saying, like the instructional, what is our instructional goal for that data? What are we trying to achieve with that? That's what we need to think about. We are in this global, mindset where, more data is better. So let's collect data for today and then think of how we are going to use it tomorrow. But we don't need to do that. I think that's a very wrong way. Like we have been trained to think that the more data we have, the better it is. And the more we can do with it, we'll figure out a way what we can do with it. So even if we are using 20% of it and 80% is just sitting there, and at some point, sometime in life, we'll decide on how to use it. I don't think that's the right mindset we should have. We need to think of the end goal in mind when we are collecting this data. What is the purpose of this? How are we going to use it? What are the different types of data types that we need for our source, for the objective, and then the collection method. And I'll talk a little bit about each of these. Next slide, please. So let's look at the different data types, right? We talked about PI a lot. So the confidential versus anonymous data. So PI is the personally identifiable information. So that includes like social security number, name, email address, things that identify you, phone number, mobile number. Then there are other things that may not be directly tied to you, like somebody could be an address, that could be many people. But so think of more as opposed to like personally identify, somebody can identify who this person is with that piece of information. That is called PII. And collecting PII information is like really, we need to understand why we are doing it versus anonymous data. So you can also collect a lot of data and then aggregate data, then it becomes anonymous. So you are anonymizing the data and then using it for like insights and figuring it out like patterns and trends, whether it's for e-commerce or business or school, like kids, like how are they performing in particular subjects? How is a school performing in STEM or in different levels? So that's like you take all of the data and maybe even take personally identifiable information, but then transform that into anonymized data and then put out reports and surveys on aggregate level. Next slide, please. Yes, so important for us to consider how the platforms we are using and collecting data. So that again includes individual versus aggregate. So are we collecting data on an individual level, meaning we can say that this child is underperforming, is being left behind, versus we are aggregating that information for the school or the district level, right? So if look at it like a thumbprint. So if that's very unique to us, and even gait, how many of you know what gait is? Like gait is our way of walking, and that may not feel like, that's personally identified, but now all these facial recognition softwares and like other types of security softwares, they can actually, even if you have your face covered, they can identify you based on the way you walk. So that's also a PII. And there are security cameras everywhere, right? So as we are doing all these things, yes, we want to be safe and we want to keep our children safe and our educators safe. But at the same time, we need to understand what we are collecting and how much is it ethical. Next slide, please. Here are a few different data collection methods. So we do this all the time, and sometimes we are not even thinking about, what information are we collecting and why do we need it? And are we collecting personally identifiable information, or are we going to aggregate it and anonymize it? We are doing it through forms and questionnaires. We are doing it through personal interviews, observation, documents and records, oral histories, combination of research, obviously online tracking. Merv talked a lot about that. How are we getting ads on things that we have visited? So there's something called I'm a marketer, so it's called retargeting. Yeah. So basically, if you see an ad, you put something in the shopping cart and then you don't complete the purchase, then there is a ad pixel. There's a small JavaScript on the website that actually tracks your behavior. And now, even if they don't know who you are exactly because you did not leave a footprint, through your IP address, they can basically track you and retarget you, show you those ads at different places that you go, and hopefully try to convince you to complete that purchase. And now with all these third-party cookies that are being banned with CCPA, like you have an option to opt out and the cookie banners pop up. So we need to know what that means and how we can, and Californians do have the do not sell my information, and the delete act just went into law a couple of days ago. So we have a lot of power to, as consumers, as well as people who collect data. We need to make sure that we are doing it ethically, and we give option to say no. Whenever we are collecting data, and I'll talk about this a little bit, there needs to be a clear option to opt out. Next slide, please. So informed consent, right? So whatever we are collecting data for, it has to be an informed consent. We need to let our data subjects know that we are collecting the following information on them. How will it be used? What are the terms and conditions of that usage? We need to give them the power to change that consent at a later point in time. Like they could say that today I may give consent, but 30 days later, I may feel like I don't want this information about me to be kept and stored, and I should have the option to opt out even at a later stage. So some examples could be researchers inform participants about the study, or cookie policy of website visitors. And we need to, even in the school websites, need to have this and work with the IT team to make sure that we are compliant. Next slide, please. So opt-in versus opt-out, right? There are different models of cookie policies, and CCPA versus GDPR differentiate mainly on these. Like the GDPR basically says that you have to start with opt-out, meaning anybody who comes to your website, you can't collect data on them unless they opt in. Versus in the US, even the CCPA in California, starts with opt-in, meaning you can collect data on everyone unless they decide to opt out. And you can actually go in and say which one's necessary, cookies only versus marketing, targeting, all of those cookies. You can say that you don't want anything else on you except for the necessary only. One step further, Californians have this delete act, which protects them to say, like, if I do not want any information, my purchase history, my browsing history, my search history, any kind of data that has been collected through third-party sources. Nowadays, there are even data brokers that have huge amounts of data, not only on our online activity, but also of our real world in-person activity. Like if I go to a car dealership for a gas change, for a car, like a oil change, they know what kind of car I drive. If I purchase something for my kids, they know what is the age of my kids, what kind of things am I buying. So all of that they are now piecing all of this data on every customer together and creating a 360-degree profile on us. And we have the option to opt out. So why I'm sharing this with you is whether we are collecting information and data on others or we are ourselves consumers of this, being aware that we have the rights and we have the power to opt out. You can even say delete my information, meaning no data broker will be allowed to sell your information. Next slide, please. And so we definitely need to clearly have a do not sell my information in our policy page and let people opt out. And then clear sunset policy, right? When we are collecting information, we need to have clear sunset policy. Like, especially for sensitive information, whether it's healthcare related or personally identifiable information, what is the duration of this geo-tracking, things that we are going to collect this data on a data subject, and how long are we going to store it? Whether it's 30 days or 3 years, we need to clearly mention it. And how are you going to use it? You're not going to sell it to third party, or you are going to sell it, or if somebody opts out, then you definitely can't. So we need to honor all of that. And people can also request to ask any company to say, whatever data you have, I need to know about it. And I think the law is within 30 days, we have to send them information on what kind of data have we collected on them. So that's compliance. Next step. So I want to share some free resources. I know we are almost at the end of our hour, so I want to share some free resources for students. There's an incredible opportunity for students nationwide to participate in our Ethics First Data and AI challenges that will help you learn new skills as well as earn volunteer hours. And because Data Ethics for All Foundation is a Presidential Volunteer Service Award certifying organization, long word, what that means is that you can accrue, volunteers who are eligible can accrue those hours towards the PVS award, and they can be eligible for the bronze, silver, or gold award, where they get a letter from the President of the United States and a badge of honor. So that's an incredible opportunity, and you don't really need technical skills to participate in this. We will not ask you to work on data or build an AI model. These are basically ways for you to think. Some examples would be how is social media creating polarization or helping more with polarization, right? So you talk about these things and it helps you understand about the topics that we are talking about today, like the cookie policies and things like that. And one more resource I would like to share for educators. Yeah, like I said, we are a PVSA certifying organization. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, these are some of the challenges. We have 12 open challenges currently. Yeah, and then this is a resource for educators. We are building the AI Educators Council, which will bring information to educators. I know that there is a lot of, we all have a lot of questions, especially around education and for our next generation of kids, how is ChatGPT going to affect their learning and things like that. So we definitely need to jump in with both feet and understand what are the consequences and how we can help the next generation of kids. AI is here to stay. ChatGPT is here. We cannot stand on the sidelines. We have to also jump in with both feet to be able to help our kids do better. So with that, thank you so much. And I'll be here with a few minutes more to hang out with you.
Thank you, Shilpi. I love what your proactive rather than reactive approach, right? Like we need to start with the ethics conversation at the beginning. We need to start with kids understanding, educators understanding, even us as consumers understanding what's happening from the beginning, rather than saying, oh, all this data was collected. I could opt out. I just pushed yes. Like I just kept going. I didn't really read it, right? Which we all might be guilty of, right? Myself
Yes.
included, I'll be honest. But so important that you consider all of these things, because it's complex, but it's true. I feel like the AI companies need us more than we need them, to be honest, right? I mean, they need all our data or they stop learning and
Yes.
they're irrelevant, right? So absolutely. Thank you so much for all of that. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask any of our speakers, you can feel free to, or anything you noticed or wondered, we'll give you a minute or so to do that. And then I'm going to let you know what resources will be coming to you afterwards as well. So go ahead and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the chat. I also want you to know what our next steps are. So all registrants are going to receive an email by the end of this week that has links to the CDE AI resources, a PDF of this presentation, any resources that were mentioned in today's webinar, and a feedback form. And then once the recording is ready, and it has been released, that will be sent to you as well. So you actually receive 2 emails with all of that information. That's also why for future webinars, even if you're not able to attend, people have told me they still register so that they can get the video and the resources later. That's absolutely okay. So I also want to let you know that on the 23rd, we are going to be delving into AI prompting and AI errors. So how do we make sure that we can leverage the most out of AI, but also critique its inaccuracies? And so how can we make sure that we're using it as efficiently as possible? So that is coming. You'll see the registration link is there if you want to take a picture, but you will also receive this information in the email that will come out by the end of this week. And the next webinars for November have been announced, or excuse me, November and December are now being announced as well. So we are going to delve deeper into bias and social impacts, which Merv touched upon, responding to algorithmic bias. That's so key in data ethics. So what do we do now that we know there's algorithmic bias? And then we're going to look deeper, as Shilpi did, about what is AI? Let's look under the hood a little bit and figure out a little bit more about that. So as always, we will have featured speakers again. We will make sure that there are actionable resources, just like we're shared today, from common sense and data ethics and all of the great acronyms, the alphabet soup that Anthony shared with us that you can ask your IT people about. And again, we will be and I see a question in the chat about retargeting with cookies ending next year. That might be, I think Shilpi might have an answer to that regarding the new law that I did see a headline about that just passed in California. So please feel free to connect with us. This information will be in the email as well, but please feel free to connect and get on our listserv. And I want to thank you for all that you do. I also want to say it was determined that there will be a 1-pager that kind of summarizes each webinar topic. And so that's going to be coming out to you as well in PDF form. So that's something that actually just was announced today. We actually thought about it like this week. So wanted to just be more supportive for you. Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Feel free to stay for a couple minutes to ask questions if you'd like. And have a wonderful, wonderful day. A reminder on the day of each webinar. I don't know if Zoom allows me to do that. I can look into it, but I do know that you can add the webinar once you get that confirmation email. I believe you can add it to your calendar. So that might be the best bet, but that is a great request, and I will look into Zoom to see if we can do that in the future. This is great feedback. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine.